and welcome to Tarkin's Top Shelf, the only Star Wars literature podcast on the internet, hosted by myself, Mark Suter, and Becca Benjamin. We dissect and analyze your favorite and maybe your least favorite canon books, and we always keep it positive. How are you, Becca?
I'm doing much better today. I'm excited to be here. This feels great today. I'm excited. How are you?
I'm doing well. It's a Saturday. It's a beautiful day. It's about time we have some weather that feels like, like the right
Spring.
date. Yeah, everybody's not here for the weather. So let's get right into it. We have a guest, obviously. Becca, can you introduce her?
Absolutely. So today, as part of Podathon 24 fundraiser for MakeAWish Foundation, we are so excited to welcome for the first time on our show, Bonnie Burton. Most of you Star Wars nerds are going to know her as a former senior editor and social media strategist at StarWars.com for Lucasfilm and staff writer for Star Wars Insider magazine for 10 years. Holy cow. Currently working as a freelance writer with a specialty in writing about topics for young, child, and teen audiences. And I've been looking forward to this for years. Hi, Bonnie. How are you?
I'm okay. I look like a wreck because my air conditioning's not on and it's actually hot in LA for the first time this year. So I'm like, if I start sweating profusely, I'm not like nervous or under indictment or anything. It's just literally like, oh God, okay, I gotta get the fan going. I had an R2D2 fan somewhere, but I don't know where I put it. I think I left it out for special May the 4th celebrations, and now I can't find it. Spoken like a true ADHD nerd, where I'm like, okay, where did I leave everything? I feel like I'm going to turn into a meme at some point, and I should just like lean into it. But thank you for having me on the show. I really appreciate it. As you know, I'm a big Star Wars fan, as well as, a former Lucasfilm employee, being there for a very long time, and but I've written a lot of Star Wars books and crafts, and if you live long enough and you're a Star Wars nerd, you kind of do a little bit of everything all the time, and you end up doing as much as you can because you love the franchise that much. So even though I'm not officially part of the Lucasfilm family anymore, I still hope I'm part of the Star Wars family until death, and even then, in the afterlife, I hope I can still say that I'm a Star Wars fan. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you. Happy May the 4th be with you on Star Wars Day. And I guess tomorrow, the next day is May the 6th be with you, for May the 5th be with you. I don't know if we kept going with days. That's something I have to ask the fans.
Well, I think the way I worked it out was May the 4th, Cinco de Mayo, and then Revenge of the 6th. So I don't know.
Yeah, I just kept going with it. I think I even have a happy May IG8 for May 8th. IG88. Yeah, like I just keep going with the numbers until I run out. So I'm celebrating days no one else is. So that's the story of my life as a Star Wars fan.
Which is fine. It can be a Star Wars day every day if you're a Star Wars fan.
Right? It should be. Yeah. We should celebrate every day because it's such a great franchise, but also Star Wars fans will make a Star Wars fiesta, Star Wars party out of anything. And I think that's one of the reasons I love being part of that family is we'll find a way to celebrate Star Wars daily if we can. And we usually do.
I think probably between all the cast, crew, and writers and all that, there's probably a birthday for somebody every day in Star Wars. So yeah, we see celebrations all the time. Yes, random background actor there. It's his birthday today.
Yeah, and I usually, because I started our Star Wars official social media. I when I first started, I was doing all the community management of the message boards, and then I created the Star Wars fan blogs, which was a thing. So if you were a hyperspace member, you could have your own StarWars.com URL as a blog. While everyone else's, had their boring GeoCities or whatever they had, you could have a StarWars.com URL for a blog for many years, which was really exciting. And I started all of our social media, and I ran all the social media. So I was the social media person for StarWars.com, IndianaJones.com, all the way up to 2000. I think it was like 2012. And then it turned into a bigger thing we were about to be bought by Disney. So I think it turned into a thing where they thought they needed to have a whole staff and they wanted to change it all up. And so I got to at least be there at the beginning and really facilitate community as much as possible, retweet fans as every day, every hour if I could, just so they could feel seen. And I'm a big fan of reminding everyone of the social part of social media and not turn it into argue fest or PR dumping ground. So I'm a big fan of keeping official stuff for the fans and social media. I tried my best to do that. So hopefully people appreciated that and had fun.
Oh, yes. I want to tell you from the bottom of my heart, those were the best days of Star Wars fandom. In my opinion, that is the first time, and I'm going to get teary-eyed. That is the first time I felt like I met like-minded people because, as you know, it was hard for people like us women to be taken seriously in Star Wars. So having that hyperspace blog, which I used to read them. Finally, I took the plunge and I'm like, I'm just going to do it. Just going to sign up. And the way you guys did that, I mean, you had the blog of the day, and to be chosen for that, you felt like you were special. I mean, it was the most amazing thing. And it was so well moderated. It was beautiful. You did it. Awesome.
I mean, and here's the thing, like the message boards, I think our message boards, before we did the blogs, our message boards were some of the best message boards because we also had moderators that were volunteer moderators that worked under me who were hardcore Star Wars fans, but they were they all had like great moves, like monikers. Like I feel like my glasses keep getting more and more crooked. I think Dark Moose, it was Darth Moose or Dark Moose. There's so many different moderators I could call out, but they did such a good job of making people feel safe space, included. We did not allow trolling. We did not allow racism, homophobia, ageism, sexism, all the isms. We weren't allowing that. We wanted to keep it a positive space. I always was on the message boards constantly, just making sure that people were behaving themselves. I mean, now it's all done by AI. Now you just get tagged and thrown into, jail on Instagram or Twitter, or not Twitter. Twitter's kind of like Wild West right now, but it's all done by AI for most companies, and most studios don't even have official message boards or official blogs or anything. So when I was there, and I had done community for other sites before I got to Lucasfilm. So for me, it was make it a safe space, make it fun, make sure people are behaving, but also like really encourage creativity and humor and bonding and friendship. And that's, I know it sounds so hokey now and quaint now because social media is a cesspool, feel like a cesspool. So I always try to make it a fun experience for everyone. And I think, those were kind of the glory days of social media before it turned into what it is now. I started the Star Wars, what I called Superfan program, which now would be called influencer program. We didn't have that term back then, but I always wanted to showcase fans that were doing creative stuff that were diverse. So it wasn't just the same type of fan. So it's always like, people in the gay community, women, people that identify as women, people that I think never really get showcased enough, people of color. Like I wanted to make sure that it wasn't just the stereotypical what everyone thought at that time a Star Wars fan, which was like, I hated people that said this because I think that's really degrading, but people are like, the straight white guy, mouth breather living in the basement of their parents' home. Like that was always the stereotypical nerd that the media really perpetuated, comedians perpetrated. And I was like, that's not Star Wars. Star Wars, my thought, and I think a lot of people in Lucasfilm marketing department, we always stressed Star Wars is for everyone. So it doesn't matter what your age is, doesn't matter where you're coming into Star Wars. That was another thing, because when I was there, prequels were, I was in the middle of the prequels, right? So that was an era where a lot of old school Star Wars fans were, I don't want to say all of them, because a lot of them did like the prequels, but a lot of them felt betrayed because in their mind, they had a vision of what they wanted the next 3 Star Wars films to be, and that wasn't it. So they would attack the films online. You had the beginnings of people just ripping apart Star Wars on Reddit and other areas, and which is fine. Everyone's allowed opinion. You don't have to like everything. It's vast enough that there's something for everyone. It's vast enough for there's critiques from everyone, right? But I always stressed you can dislike as much as you want in the Star Wars universe. Just don't come after the fans who like it.
Correct.
Because then you're ruining the whole community. So let people, because I love the Star Wars holiday special, and that's as like low down the ladder as you could get of Star Wars stuff. And I've always loved it. I grew up watching it. I watched it when it came out live when I was a kid. I love Carol Burnett, the Carol Burnett show. So those were the writers on that. But also there were, Harvey Korman was in it. A lot of the Carol Burnett show people were in it, involved in it. And I loved B. Arthur, of course. How could you not? And then the original cast. How could you not? And then you get to learn all about Chewie's family, which is huge. We didn't have that like we do now. Now we have books and comics and everything. Back then, we didn't have that. Back then, as children, we were like, we'll take anything. Just give us something. Like, because we didn't have streaming back then. We didn't even have cable back then. So, yeah, it was kind of like we were eager and ready for it all. It was confusing for a lot of people who weren't used to that era. So I will say, after being in the Star Wars documentary that came out last year, Disturbance in the Force, which you should all watch. I think it's going to be on TV streaming soon, but you can get the DVD, a Blu-ray. That's a great love letter to the holiday special, as well as the best of the best people are involved in that program. And also you have like Seth Green and Weird Al and, Jonathan Rensler, who was with Lucasfilm. That's his last interview before he passed away from cancer. I love Jonathan Rensler. I was very close to him, and I really looked up to him a lot as a Star Wars author as well. So, it's a great thing. But I was always like, look, if I can like the holiday special and behave myself, y'all can do the same thing on social media, on message boards, around each other at Comic-Con, around each other at Star Wars Celebration. It's a chance for us all to get along. You don't all have to like everything the same way, but we don't have to rip each other apart as we are Star Wars fans liking and disliking certain things in the franchise. And that's something I always stressed. But, that's an uphill battle sometimes, especially when people just really don't want to hear reason, or they just want to be in that negative space sometimes. That's where they live. And I get that. But when I was at Lucasfilm, I always try to keep it positive. Sorry, that was a long TED Talk that you did not have before.
Great. That's great.
And quite honestly, like, I came away from the prequels in my, early 20s, and I thought that I had everything figured out in the world. And so for a while there, I was just like, I hate him. I had a friend that loved the prequels, and every time there was a party, I would track him down and tell him why it was terrible and how I could have done it better. And then through podcasts, like the Force Cast back like 10 years ago, I started to realize, wait, people like the prequels? Oh, the Clone Wars, what's that? That sounds terrible. I'm going to watch that because I'm curious. And then it turned my entire opinion around. And then going into the sequel trilogy, I carried that attitude forward of like, it's a miracle that movies exist. It's a miracle that anything crosses the finish line at all.
I used to tell people that. Yeah, I used to tell people that all the time. It's like, first of all, be thankful that we got prequels, because we could have been in a whole era of, hey, you got 3 movies, that's it, enjoy. That's all you get. And the cartoons, right? And the Ewoks live action TV show that people seem to forget. So it's like, you should be glad that you have stuff to complain about, because there's franchises that have died out that were beloved in other sci-fi fantasy worlds. I mean, luckily we are kind of spoiled for choice as nerds now, because, for me, I was a huge Doctor Who fan, so I was so happy when that got continued. I was a huge Battlestar Galactica fan, so that reboot was exciting for me. I am a huge Star Trek fan, so that I always tell people I'm like pansexual in real life and pansexual in geekdom, because I love a lot of different things. Because there used to always be that thing of, the lazy journalists, and I was an entertainment journalist for over 20 years, so I understand what they're doing for clickbait. But it was always like on Star Wars Day, people were like, we should write an article about how Star Trek is better to get clicks. I'm like, you do realize there's a lot of Star Wars fans that are also Star Trek fans, and vice versa. So you can't really do that John Hughes, like high school rivalry, jocks versus nerds kind of pitting again. It's all nerds. So it's like we all like Lord of the Rings just as much as we like Game of Thrones, you know what I mean? Or at least I do. So yeah, you could do that madness thing where you just pit all the sci-fi against each other, but it's kind of stupid because most of us like all of it. So yeah, it's one of those things too where, you know, as a Star Wars fan, I get it. I get that in your mind, you've been writing fan fiction about what you want Star Wars to be since you watched Star Wars. That's the plight of fandom, right? Is that we're like, well, if we were in charge, this is what we would. Because if I was in charge, let me tell you, because I've started many meetings at Lucasfilm where I was like, okay, we should do this whole thing where I do Akamina's backstory, and we should do a whole like, I don't know, like Gilmore Girls thing, or like some sort of like high school, like, you know, like Vampire Diaries, but instead it's like all of the old ladies of Star Wars as young girls back in their era. So it's like Bletchley Circle or something, or St. Trinian's, where it's like the fruit lady that was, you know, talking to Anakin as a young boy in Phantom Menace because she's the old lady, right? But she's probably got a great backstory. And Akamina's running the cantina. What was B. Arthur like when she was young? And you know, Jocasta as a teenager was kicking butt. So I always wanted to put those three, like Charlie's Angels, and have them have like adventures as teenagers. I pitched that every single meeting of stuff where I was like, hey, we should do it, but as a series on StarWars.com, or we should have a YouTube show or do an animated show. And this is way before Disney decided to do an animated series on YouTube, and way before the Star Wars show existed. I remember pitching that. And, you know, it's also like, maybe I was a little too ambitious and a little too early before everyone was on board with all that. Now it's like, there's everything. And, you know, I wish I could have been part of that officially. That would have been nice. But at the same time, I'm just glad as a fan, we're getting a lot of stuff that Disney's just thrown against the wall to see what sticks. And some of it works, some of it doesn't. But who cares? We're getting everything now. It's like Disney Plus is like Star Wars of every shade and color you can imagine. So I don't know. I've always been one of those people that's like, yeah, I get it. You didn't like the prequels, but here's the thing. There's a lot of fans that do. And every time I would do a Star Wars drawing tutorial with other artists, like with the artists, and I'd be kind of like the drag queen MC at Comic-Con, or we would do Star Wars celebration panels. If there were a lot of kids in the audience, I always did a raise your hand poll. And I always said, okay, who here loves, and I would go down the original trilogy. And then I'd start with the prequels. And I noticed every year more and more hands would go up of who liked Phantom Menace, who liked Attack of the Clones, who liked Revenge of the Sith, and less hands were up for the original trilogy. And then when Clone Wars, of course, came out, a lot of kids freaking love Clone Wars, and that was their gateway into Star Wars. They didn't even watch the films. They were just they were there for Clone Wars. So there's fans that came into this fandom community way different ways than the usual suspects when I was a kid and when I was, growing up as an adult. So I always say there's something for everyone. It doesn't matter how weird you are. It doesn't matter how normal you think you are. It doesn't matter how boring you think you are, or how not nerd or geek you are. There's something for everybody.
Definitely.
Anyway, sorry. I went on another. Like, I was such a Star Wars Holiday Special fan that I made sure to get Star Wars Holiday. I snuck some Star Wars Holiday crafts. This is the Star Wars craft book, which you can get anywhere. But I don't know if you could. I don't know if you could tell, but that bantha right here, that was inspired by the one that the Imperial forces ripped up in Lumpy's room looking for secret plans. There was no bantha you could buy. And so I was like, why don't we just make it? Show kids how to make it. That's what the genesis of this was, because when I was in charge as, working for StarWars.com, I was always like, as a senior editor, we were in charge. There's just 3 of us in charge of that whole site. And I was like, we should do crafts and drawing tutorials and things kids can print out, turn off their computer, print out, and make things with their family, because I wanted to really instigate and encourage family activities, friend activities, solo activity. I was a solo crafter. I was a weird ADHD kid before ADHD was a thing, and I loved crafting. So I always snuck in stuff that was, little, like, if you knew the Star Wars Holiday Special, you would see some shout outs in there. But Anyway, I can talk for hours, by the way. You have to interrupt me. I'll just keep talking.
Right, I know.
By the way, this is my
Love it.
original Burger King glass. I still have them all. I bring
do
them
have
out.
those two as well. I wanted to actually thank you because honestly, you were just saying there was only 3 of you. Everything you guys have done actually paved the way for us to do something like this. So think about that for a minute. I mean, without what you guys have done, we wouldn't have this type of platform to do something good and give back. And that's huge. And that's a testament to everything you guys have put into this.
And I would say,
It's
a
amazing.
lot of things we take for granted today. That wasn't a thing. I will say, with our staff, Pete Vilmer, who I believe is still I think he got moved over more to the publicity side, marketing side. He's amazing. He's a great author. He's done Star Wars poster book. He's done other things, but he's a fan, true and true, but also a parent. So, he brings that to the table. Pablo Hidalgo, obviously, he was there when I was there. We kind of started in the same level. Like I was brought in because he was getting shipped to Sydney to overlook Revenge of this, or to look over the set and do stuff there while I was, holding down the fort at Big Rock Ranch and Skywalker and over before we even moved to Presidio in San Francisco. And I think that was 2005 when we moved over to Presidio. We were the first movie studio to have a webcam on the set when they were making the movie. That seems so weird to say that because now I don't think people use webcams anymore because it's so, obviously they don't want, hackers or whatever getting in, but that was never done before. Now it's like after a while, everyone started doing it, but we were the first. Yes, and if you were a Star Wars hyperspace fan, you got, if you paid for the fan club, you got all access. And because it was in Australia, it was opposite time in the United States. So I would stay up all night, take screen grabs of what was happening live, then write an article that morning of the highlights. So you would get a highlights, usually daily or every 3 days I would write something. So it'd be like, I think you might have missed this. And it was a screen grab of, oh my God, there was and also the actors were having fun pranking. Because there was a Obi-Wan Kenobi, Ewan McGregor dummy that was used so Anakin could actually carry it. So because he's a dude, he's not light. So Hayden Christensen had to carry him at some point. And so there was a mannequin double and Ewan McGregor knew that webcam was there and he would mess with the fans because there's no sound. So it's only audio, or it's only video. And he would put that dummy in the most precarious positions, the most weirdest, where you're like, oh my God, is Ewan McGregor okay? Because it's not like super clear. It was a grainy, it was like first generation webcam. So it wasn't like this. It wasn't like super clear. It was like, wait, what's going on in the background? So he was always pranking fans. At that time, there's only a handful of Star Wars fan sites that would talk about it. I think Force.net obviously did. I don't even know if Wikipedia was up yet. So it was like, he was pranking fans constantly. But also they moved it around a lot. So Pablo being on set was great because he moved it to the costume department or the creature department. So you could see Dave and Lou Elsie making, painstakingly making the Chewbacca, costumes and other characters that weren't announced yet. So you were like, as a fan going, oh my God, what character is that? And then they would put it in the skylight so you could see things being filmed, but it's all green screen. So you wasn't sure what was happening, but you could see certain characters fighting or talking. And then you would see all the creatures because there's a lot of practical effects. So you would see a lot of that. You would see Hayden and Ewan practicing their lightsaber duel that would be on Mustafar, but you didn't know that yet. So us having that there was huge. Us having fan blogs, no other studio was doing that. Like I said earlier, we had message boards, but also I always wanted to make sure that the fans got profiled on the site. So like you said earlier, we did blog of the week, but I also profiled the 501st and the Rebel Legion and the R2 builders, but also people that were doing charity work, teachers, kids. I always profiled kid crafts. And then when social started, I'm like, okay, I see people doing hashtags. Why don't we do Wookiee Wednesday? Why don't we do Sith Sunday? Why don't we do, I was literally every day of the week, I did a hashtag campaign before hashtag campaigns were a thing for studios. And I was starting to see us get on best practices documents. Wired always had us in our we were always in the top 5 studios to watch online because we were doing all this great groundbreaking weird stuff that nobody was doing. But we loved Star Wars and we loved online. And so we're like, well, why don't we just try it and see what happens, see what the fans think. Not everything worked, but I mean, I will say I'm very proud that I got pod race as a hashtag actually trending during the Super Bowl because I set up a whole, like, it was kind of like an interactive pod race with celebrities, and each of them had their own pod racer, and I was the MC, and as before Twitter had limits on how many times you could tweet in an hour, and I was like tweeting a virtual pod race as the, like, you know, the Howard Cosell, like, you know, the NASCAR like person that's saying, oh, and this person that passed this person. And it was really fun. And we ended up, I mean, the jockiest day of the year in the United States is the Super Bowl. And we got the Phantom Menace, something from the Phantom Menace, which everyone was like crapping on. We got that trending in a positive way for a pod race. And that was to promote the DVD re-release, I think it was. And I was just like, this is pretty cool, because fans were in, and it was fans from everywhere. And also people just probably bored with Super Bowl talk on Twitter because it was dominating Twitter. People are like, what's this pod race thing? And like I think it was like Seth Green and Kyle Newman and, you know, all these Star Wars celebrities that were either part of Star Wars or they just love Star Wars were I think there are people from bands and things that I got recruited. I recruited them to have their own actors had it. So it was one of those moments in Twitter history, which seems very quaint now, that never would have happened if we didn't try it. So I was a big fan of like, hey, we got to take some risks, have some fun. Not everything has to be a pre-approved marketing campaign. Let's just experiment. And I think that's what was fun too, is that was an era at Lucasfilm where Lucas Online got to do a lot of stuff because they were just like, just let them do their thing, because no one thought it was a big deal yet. Once it became a big deal, then you had to get pre-approval for everything, but like you do now, which is pretty standard. But back then we were Wild West. We were like, oh, let's try this. Let's do this. How about we just, well, why don't I give, like, because I had the Admiral Sackbar puppet thing for the Star Wars scrapbook. I was like, why don't we have him? Why don't we put him in charge of Twitter for a day? So you would see these images of the puppet like at the computer like this. Sometimes I put him in front of the webcam. When the webcam came from the set, we brought it back to Lucasfilm. So a lot of times when we put it in Ben Burt's editing booth, so you would get to see Ben Burt edit cool. Revenge of the Sith, and you get to see George eat his daily, you know, chicken sandwich on white bread and drink his Diet Coke and eat his Lay's potato chips in front of the cam. And then sometimes the cam would be in our office and I'd be like, okay, this is who's in front. And then, you know, you never see that now. You never see that studios do stuff like that now. And I think it's like the beginnings of MTV when they were really having fun with it. It's just like that. I love that I got to be the Martha Quinn of Lucasfilm, and only a handful of people are going to get that reference. Google it, kids, because that was the beginning of MTV. So yeah.
It was a different time.
But I wanted to let you know, as a fan myself, I really appreciate what you guys do. I feel very honored to even be asked to be part of this. And I will always be on any Star Wars podcast that asks me on. I try not to talk too much, but I clearly have proven that point that I cannot stop talking about Star Wars and how much I love it. But I do appreciate you guys as well. And I wanted you to know that. But to give back to the community in that way is very important and essential. I mean, I always was like, hey, as much as we can, let's talk about the charities that the 501st do things for on the StarWars.com site, but also online on, you know, in social, and really, you know, remind people there's a, you know, a community to fandom, but there's also a charity aspect that I think Star Wars fans have done better than any other fandom. I think Star Wars fans really understand giving back's importance, and making kids feel happy is important, and Star Wars is a big part of that. So Make-A-Wish is big, and I'm so glad that you're doing something with them, and I'm so glad that there's still a Star Wars connection to that, because that's very, very important to me. And yeah, I'm just so happy that you guys are doing that too. That's great.
Yep. And as we wrap up here, just a reminder to everybody to donate to Make-A-Wish. There's a QR code, and also there's a link. So the more that you donate, there are drawings for different prizes. Just remember that. But it's really all about the kids and helping Make-A-Wish Foundation. So thank you, Podathon. Thank you, Bonnie. May the Force be with you all.